We'll be sending a recording out in case anyone's wondering afterwards, and we will make all of our stuff available on Voiceflow events for streaming afterwards. So don't worry, you'll be able to go back, you'll be able to reap all of Kane's wisdom, so then that way we can keep going through that. And to answer your question, Joel, AMA means Ask Me Anything, which means there's very few questions that are off the table, but keep it nice. And we are going to try to make sure that we're doing more and more of these styles of events so you guys can get connected with more thought leaders in the space, be able to connect with more people within the community, and dive in a little bit deeper on some of the stuff that we as the Voiceflow team might not be able to answer. So hopefully if you guys have any feedback on this, feel free to message me as well after this. You'll see my email come up on this as well. And I see that Kane has joined.
Hello.
Kane, there you are.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. Very well. Nice to see you again. It's been a while, a couple of months, hasn't it?
Yeah, back when humans used to be able to actually talk to each other in person. It's a weird time.
Yeah. When we were allowed to have face-to-face meetings and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, you have a lot of faces behind you, so I feel like you're in no shortage.
I feel as though I'm in a face-to-face meeting every time I do a Zoom call, to be fair, because it's background's a bit hectic. But yeah, how are we? How are you all right?
Yeah, you're speaking to, right now we have about 20 people from our community in here and a few people joining via live. We have a few more people that are slowly trickling in. So thanks so much for taking the time with us. I'm really jealous of your hat. And I hope that we can one day get something similar for our team.
Indeed. So we've got that, and we've got this one. Exposure's a bit bright, but it's little white one. And the best part about the hat is that if you put it on backwards, I don't know if you can see, but it's got a little hashtag VUX World.
Just always promoting.
Yeah.
This is what we're missing.
Yeah, that's it. That's all you need is some Voiceflow caps. Summertime, you know what I mean? It's sun's shining, sun's out. Get some Voiceflow caps on the go. I've been debating either selling them and then donating the money to the NHS, or printing a load of these posters out and doing the same with those. So, selling off the posters and then donating all the money to the NHS. Problem is, they're an absolute nightmare to post because you need big, massive, long tubes, and then you need to get them all to the actual post office. So it's like, I think it's a sound plan, but I don't know how realistic it is.
I don't know. I think that you should sell your stereotypical face cutout stickers, and just, every time that you go to a voice event, just everywhere.
That's it. Well, we do have, they're on the business cards. So me and Dustin have both got the cutout face on the business cards, but yeah. But exciting times.
Cool. So thanks again for everyone that's joining. We're going to kick things off. So in case you guys are not familiar with Kane, you will be by the end of this. Kane is a wonderful voice personality, thought leader, strategic mind in the space. We've had the pleasure of getting Braden on his podcast, meeting him in person, enjoying a few beers and conversations about the future. And that's kind of what brought this forward, so that you guys can get that same experience. So without further ado, welcome. This is a series of events where we're going to be able to connect you guys with a bunch of different people within the industry and hopefully be able to answer more questions. As you guys know, hopefully everyone here is familiar with Voiceflow, but we make it easy to design, prototype, and build voice apps with as much or as little as code as you would like. But more importantly, really what we're excited about is trying to democratize conversation design for everyone, making it easier for this whole industry to level up, for more people to be able to build more interesting things, and to make that easier than ever. So in this series, we're trying to do that. We're trying to interview more thought leaders, highlight creators and their stories, connect businesses and futurists, but also help grow that with our community. So really trying to make sure that we're providing value with what you guys, who are our builders, who are the people who are helping grow this industry every day, can get out of these events. And if you guys aren't familiar already, feel free to check out or join our global community. We're going to be giving early access to all of these events and always be polling in there for new people to bring on. So if you're curious and joining that conversation, you can definitely do so. So without further ado, let's get started. My name is Emily Lonetto. I'm going to be hosting today. I'm the head of growth at Voiceflow. What we do over here and what my team's really focused on is trying to engage more stuff in the community, create better marketing material, more tutorials, more engagements, and really try to help other businesses grow on the platform. And today I'm super excited to be sitting down virtually with the Kane Simms. He is the co-founder of VUX World, is a wonderful podcast personality who takes a ton of time and a ton of effort in trying to connect with a lot of people in the space. And is also wildly entertaining and knows a ton about voice. So really, really excited to sit down with him today. Thanks so much, Kane.
Pleasure. Very kind words. It's it's a pleasure. It's nice to be on the other end, as you mentioned. You know, we've had Braden on the podcast and stuff like that, and we've kind of been speaking for a long time. And I absolutely, love the stuff that you're doing at Voiceflow. We use it ourselves, and it is absolutely amazing. Not just the tool, but also everything you're doing in shaping and fostering the community as well is fantastic. So I'm delighted and honoured to be on.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I think before we kind of go into this, do you want to give us a little bit of a background on you? What's VUX World? What's something you really want us to know before diving into all this?
Yeah, so VUX World started as a podcast in the very early days of 2018, and it kind of started because I come across, I can't remember if it was the Google Assistant or Alexa or whatever it was, but she's beginners amateur move there. I didn't mute my devices. You'd think I'd know that by now, given that I do these kind of calls every day or so. But yeah, it started when I kind of come across Alexa, and I kind of thought to myself, so my kind of background is in music production. So I used to make music and then kind of went into kind of like film editing, sound design, stuff like that. And then I went and kind of got educated in marketing. So I got a degree in marketing, went and worked for a few marketing agencies, got interested in user experience design. Then I was a freelance writer. Then I was a consultant. Then I was a service designer. And then in the end, ended up managing digital transformation programs across kind of medium-sized organizations. And when I kind of come across Alexa, I realized that it's kind of a bit of everything that I've always done throughout my whole career. It's sound design, it's writing, it's user experience design, and it's creating services. Most of the value I see, and we'll maybe get into this a bit later on, but I see most of the value with voice interfaces being quick and easy access to services. And so that's kind of where it all come from. And then it quickly kind of, with it being one of the first voice kind of podcasts out there, what we wanted to do is really focus in on how to do stuff. So, how do you design a conversation? What even is conversation design? What's conversational AI? And we kind of wanted to sort of like find all of the experts and all of the industry thought leaders who could share their knowledge. And while we were learning, we wanted to share that with anyone else who was interested. And it just so happened that in the first kind of 6 months, it started kind of snowballing. We got invited to do a lot of talks and workshops and things like that. That quickly led into doing sort of like consultancy gigs and stuff. Then it led into us, me and Dustin, our co-founder, kind of creating and designing voice experiences for brands and agencies. And now we're kind of half consultancy, half media company kind of thing. So we've got the podcast and we do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, things like that. A lot of kind of like, I don't like the word thought leadership, but it's kind of, we tend to try and think of ourselves as the experts. So we kind of find all of the people with all of the knowledge across the globe and share that with everybody else who is building this stuff for a living to try and help them make better stuff, essentially. And then on the other side, we put all of that stuff into practice through our consultancy, working with agencies and brands, helping them find ROI with conversational AI.
Awesome. And it is no shame to be a thought leader in this space. That's kind of that stage that we're at, and why this is so exciting is to bring on people who have that experience, who have that voice where they want to share their knowledge on that. Because I think we're in this really beautiful part of voice's infancy, where everybody's opinion in this is going to help ultimately shape how all of us ramp up, how all of us expand. So thanks for sharing.
No worries. Yeah, it's you're right. I mean, there's lots of people doing some interesting stuff, and what's good about the whole kind of voice first community is that it is very communal. You know, there's loads of different people who are now starting to create content. When we launched the podcast, there was nothing out there. That's why we kind of launched it, because it was like, where do you go to learn about this stuff? You know, and then you've got now there's lots of podcasts, there's lots of articles, there's lots of blogs, there's lots of communities in Slack and Facebook and all this kind of stuff. And so it's kind of, yeah, it's growing healthily, and the more people that can contribute and share their knowledge, the better everyone will be, I think.
Awesome. So with that, I think it's a great segue in trying to get you to share some more knowledge. So I have transposed some of the community questions that people have submitted, and people are DMing me more questions after this. So we're going to have to go through some speed rounds later, but let's go through. So the first thing is, what excites you the most about voice right
now? I think what's exciting me more than anything is, you know, I've got a lot of experience with service design and digital transformation initiatives where, you know, the team I used to manage in my old job, you know, we kind of work across the organization and essentially just kind of go in there, dig everything up, rebuild everything, automate as much as we can, end-to-end digital transformation. And so that's kind of where our kind of have always been looking at voice with that kind of lens, is how can we use this technology to make companies more efficient, to make customer experiences more streamlined, to make operational kind of business units work better, function better, and also to make to kind of increase revenue by providing seamless experiences. And so I've kind of always had that lens. But most people, and I don't know if I'm generalizing for the kind of listenership, the Voiceflow community, but a lot of people have kind of got into voice from the Alexa smart speaker ecosystem side of things. So they've seen Alexa, they've seen Google, and that's kind of where it kind of started for me initially. And that's kind of the natural path people have, is they'll discover Alexa, they'll discover a Google Assistant, they'll start building stuff, they'll start playing around with it. And often that is mostly education or kind of like interactive audio, entertainment based use cases. And, you know, that's even how Voiceflow started itself, you know, a tool to create interactive stories. And that's kind of where a lot of people begin the journey. But as soon as you start lifting under the hood and you start kind of investigating a little bit more about where voice can be used effectively, you start realizing that the benefit of it is in doing those things I just mentioned: improving customer experience, improving access to service, streamlining access to service, enabling self-service, you know, blocking and allowing people to self-service on websites and things like that, so that you're blocking phone calls ending up hitting your contact centers and all those kind of things. And so what's exciting me now is that it seems as though maybe it's just because that's the way that our mind has shifted and how we've kind of been trying to work with our clients and getting them to think this way. But most people, or there's a growing understanding that voice is bigger than Alexa and Google Assistant, and that this concept of voice and it has been broadened to conversational AI. So we tend to talk about conversational AI now rather than voice specifically, even though we've got a V in our name, which I knew would come back to bite us one time. But what excites me most is that, having gone through that journey through entertainment and through leisure, through interactive audio, we're now starting to find areas where the technology is good enough and the businesses are game and ambitious enough to start really searching for those use cases where things can be used to increase productivity or used to streamline service access. And so things like, if you look at Moscow Airport, you know, automating their IVR system with a conversational agent, saving 30% of calls from hitting people in the contact center. That's what's exciting me about voice and about conversational AI. You look at Spotify, first of all, putting voice search in their app, and now, you know, it was leaked, I think, that Jane Manchun Wong, who kind of always uncovers these kind of leaks and stuff, found that they might be launching an assistant within the app. And so that I did a talk at one of the big companies a couple of weeks ago, a design talk to their design team, and I kind of created this diagram. I might have actually put it on LinkedIn, which shows the number of steps that it would take you to get from playing a song to playing another song in Spotify. And there's like 15 steps, 15 clicks that you would need to tap on, 15 times you need to tap on the screen. With the voice interface, that's stripped down to one single utterance. And so, you know, if Spotify are releasing things like that, these are the kind of things that are kind of exciting me. Real practical applications of voice technologies that can be used to measurably enhance customer experience.
That's awesome. Do you see a lot of voice experiences really evolving into that now? Or is this one of those things where you think it's going to take a longer time to get to that adoption phase?
It depends, because the adoption, one of the difficulties about having people adopt stuff right now is that if you're building for Alexa or Google Assistant, you need to draw them into that ecosystem for the purposes that you're creating stuff for. And that's where a lot of the challenges are. That's why people kind of like are always talking about discoverability, is because the Alexa ecosystem is here, the Google Assistant ecosystem is over there, but everyone is already over here on social media. They're already phoning your contact center. They're already on your website. So people are behaving over here. And what we're trying to do is bring people over here, and people are gradually using these services and the Alexas and Google Assistant for things, routine things like timers and music and that kind of stuff. And while we need to advance people's understanding of what these platforms can do, I think that's why it's difficult to get things discovered, is because not only are you kind of like fighting to be that one app that's at the tip of the iceberg, you're also fighting to bring people over into that ecosystem to discover that it can do more than music. And so if you think about applying these same technologies in other areas, like in the app, like the Spotify example, there's a company called Alan AI, which have a platform that enables you to do that. Essentially, you just plug your app in, a little bit of configuration, but you end up with a voice interface over the top of your app. Companies' voices just being acquired, but they had a really good example of web-based conversational AI. Algolia have got a voice search option, so they can streamline user journeys on websites by using their voice search. And so if you put the technology in places where people already are, there is no struggle or kind of aim or kind of like barrier to adoption, because the technology is there, it's baked in. If you phone the John Lewis customer contact line because you've got a complaint to make about something you've just got delivered, and it's an automated agent on that phone line, you're into it, you're in the experience, you'll use it because that's where you are. And so I don't know if it's early in terms of adoption in those channels. Maybe it's early in adoption of third-party skills in Alexa and Google Assistant, but we're starting to see now kind of businesses and enterprises waking up a little bit. All the big players are at it. Microsoft have got services, Amazon have got services, Google have got services, Oracle have got services, Salesforce have got services. Everyone's building the capability, and they have access to those big enterprise clients. And so we're starting to see that that's beginning to happen, at the larger companies.
Awesome. So kind of with the next question over here, which is always kind of curious, voice has been around for a little while and has definitely gained some traction recently. But what was Kane pre giant cutout head, giant personality on a podcast? What were you doing?
So as I mentioned, I kind of started when I was like 14, making music, and that was kind of what I did pretty much exclusively till I was like 21 or so. Obviously not very well, because that didn't end up amounting to anything, but that was kind of what I kind of thought I would do, and I would be working in music production or something like that. And then I ended up kind of, doing various things, bits and bobs, while I was trying to make music work. And then I realized that really what I needed to do, if I was ever going to sell music or sell myself as someone who can make music to artists, then I would need to get educated and learn about what I'm doing. And so I went to uni to study marketing, because I thought that if I learned how to market stuff, then I'll be able to market music-based services, audio production services. And in that, in the journey of that, we ended up moving down south. We ended up moving to just south of London, Tunbridge Wells, where we still are now. And I got a job at a marketing agency because I kind of got more and more interested in marketing while I was at uni. So I was at that agency for a little while, and that kind of, I was kind of like managing e-learning systems and running mobile marketing campaigns and things like that. And then we were working with an agency, and they didn't really have that good designers. They were really good at building, like they built us a CMS, a mobile CMS that hung off the back of a load of QR codes and generated QR codes and stuff, but they weren't really good at design. And so I had to kind of like step into design bits, which I've kind of done before, making music. We used to make all of our own posters and stuff like that for the events that we put on. And so I got more and more interested in design and user experience design, because I think the line between marketing and user experience design is getting thinner and thinner and thinner, with most products these days being kind of the same. If you've got a Nikon camera or a Canon camera, they're kind of the same. It's the experience of using it and the brand, the value that you buy into the brand, that is the differentiator. And so that experience, the product experience, the user experience, become kind of really appealing to me, because it's like, how can you create something and design something that gives somebody the best possible experience to then increase that loyalty or increase the sales or whatever it might be. And so I got deeper into that. I then ended up becoming a consultant, a user experience consultant, and got involved in doing lots of user research, training people in user research techniques, training people in how to use, analytics tools like Google Analytics and things like that. Excuse me. And then after that, I ended up working as a digital services manager. So I had a team of people, and we kind of were working on when you start working on the front end of websites and things like that, you realize that the website is pointless unless it can actually do something for the user. And most of the time, when you want to do something, you need to integrate into some line of business system. If you want to sell train tickets, no point in having a website that does nothing. It needs to integrate with that line of business system. And then so I started going from marketing to user experience, and then to make the user experience work effectively, you had to go into the business. And so that's kind of where I went. I went into business areas. Excuse me, I got a croak in my throat. into business areas to have a look at how they processed stuff, because if your processes are terrible and behind the scenes, then the experience on the website is going to be terrible. If someone files a complaint or does something or tries to order something and it goes through to an inbox and someone has got to manually go through those emails and then manually respond to people, the turnaround time is going to be so slow, the experience is going to be terrible. And so I started working a lot on it within enterprises, trying to streamline services and trying to make things better for the end user by making things more efficient internally. And then that's when I found Alexa and the voice kind of platforms, and that's why it's kind of it's directly everything I'd done up to this point had kind of been related. So I was a freelance writer on the side for 3 years, and I kind of like thought that I could write scripts and screenplays and stuff like that. So I used to find myself reading the writers' room on the BBC website. I just used to read scripts on a night. Funnily enough, that's exactly the kind of format that I use now when I'm designing dialogues. And so, everything kind of just started falling into place, from the writing to the user experience design, to the product strategy, to the user research, to the sound design, to everything kind of wrapped up together when, it started 2018 when we launched the podcast.
Awesome. I mean, like it's really exciting to kind of hear people who have that experience or who are obsessed with user experience and are now realizing all of the new potential that's unlocked in this new interface. Not just let's create or improve on the experiences that we already know, but instead, how can we improve and unlock experiences that were never possible before? So it's really exciting, and also not that surprising to hear that you came from a production background. But really, really kind of interesting to hear how that kind of shapes how you think about things now.
Yeah, and it's the newness of it all is, I think, because of the smart speakers and because of Google Assistant getting better and Alexa getting better and stuff like that. But the core technology, the kind of voice technology, has been around for a long time. The first kind of speech synthesis system, Audrey, I think it was called, was in like 1936 or something like that, and it's kind of been on a journey ever since then. I think it was called the shoebox from IBM, was like in 1950 odd, and that was kind of like a speech. That was the first thing that I think could recognize speech. And so it's exciting because there's a new wave, there's a new load of enthusiasm. There's a lot of new people like myself who are coming into the industry now because of these devices.
Yeah.
But the actual, the industry's existed for a long, long time. It's just that it takes something to break that adoption barrier, which kind of, it seems as though smart speakers and these assistants have managed to do.
Awesome. So let's move on to actually a kind of topical question here. Let's go back to your very first experience with Alexa or Google. What was the very first skill or app that you used?
Ooh, the very first one I ever used, to be honest, I actually think that it was like I was going through a period of trying to find opportunities where I might be able to make stuff. And I thought to myself, well, what would be quite good is, because I used to do a lot of writing, a lot of on the side, I used to do a lot of blog writing, a lot of article writing for clients, but then I also used to do like screenplay writing and sketches and things like that, because for some strange reason I fancied myself as a screenplay writer. So I just had loads and loads of notes in Evernote. I'd make like 1 or 2 notes every single day of little ideas and little kind of like taglines and punchlines and stuff, because I used to make music and fancy myself as a bit of a rapper. I used to kind of just constantly want to write stuff. And so I had this kind of idea about like just putting a load of jokes into Alexa and then just having it generate joke after joke after joke. Which I think is where absolutely everybody starts, because as soon as I started having a look at all of the skills that were out there, I found all of these dad jokes and all of these cat sounds and cat facts and things like that. And that's so one of the first ones I would have used would have been either like a dad jokes one or a random cat fact one or something like that. And at the time, I kind of thought that it was okay, but the novelty wore off really, really quickly. And so that's like basically from using the first skill I ever used, I started to think immediately, how the hell can this be possible to like, how is this a good experience? It's just, do you want to hear another one? Yeah. There's another one. Do you want to hear another one? Yeah, there's another one. Do you want to hear another one? Yeah. It just like kept going round and round and round. I was thinking, how can you make this a little bit more kind of dynamic? You know what I mean? Because a lot of the early skills, probably a lot of them still there, to be honest. Like, but a lot of the early ones were like just user experience wise were not good.
So I guess that kind of builds into the next one, but what was the first skill that you built then?
A dad jokes one. Yeah, basically that was what it is. I kind of went through. So I had all these things in Evernote, and went through and just basically built a Google sheet. Can't remember the tool that I was using. It might have been Voiceflow wasn't around then. It might have been what was Invocable called again? I've got it here. Storyline. Yeah, Storyline. Yeah. Just a random joke generator in Storyline, just to kind of get to grips with what this stuff is. But it was terrible. It's long since been taken down because I do not want to contribute to the dross that can be lurking around in there. So it was a random joke generator. Maybe I'll resurface it at some point.
I mean, if you resurface it on Storyline, it will resurface on Voiceflow. So please.
There you go then. There you go. Yeah. Maybe I'll do that.
So this is an interesting, and I think you kind of tapped on this a little bit, but what do you think is the most interesting take that voice is going to take on? Like, do you think it's going to be, is there an industry that you think it's going to impact the most? Do you think that it's maybe like more mobile adoption of it? What's the most promising thing right now?
I think, to be honest, it's anything and everything. I think that we're going to continue to see new devices. I think the smart speakers are category defining. It's a brand new category. There was no such thing as smart speakers before. There was no such thing as smart displays before. And so I think we're going to continue to see new devices pop up. What they will be, who knows? But I think that we'll continue to see a proliferation of different devices with voice interfaces in them. I also think we're going to see voice interfaces on all of our current devices, and they kind of already are. If you look at, if you've got any of the Apple gear, then you've got Siri on everything. If you've got anything Android, you've got Google Assistant on everything. And so we're kind of already seeing that. And then, so I think we're going to continue to see those platforms, the Alexa and Google Assistant, continue to kind of grow. Whether Apple will do something, who knows? Everyone's been praying for it for a long, long time. So yeah, I think we're going to see more devices, more interfaces on current devices, and we're going to start to see it also spring up on the environments that we already go to get stuff done. So whether it's in apps, whether it's in phone lines, everywhere. I was reading Braden's post actually the other day, which was really good, talking about the fact that the voice is an interface, and he alluded to the fact that it's also a platform in terms of Alexa and Google Assistant. So I think we're going to see platforms like Alexa and Google Assistant continue to rise. Maybe there's space for other platforms in there like Mycroft or a Siri or something like that. We're definitely going to see voice interfaces across various touch points, current touch points like IVRs and apps and things like that. Enterprise, I think we're going to see the enterprise really adopt it and start to open up. This is the thing is as soon as you start getting into the enterprise and you start wanting to integrate with line of business systems, you very quickly realize that a lot of those systems are legacy based, and it's very difficult to integrate with them. So a lot of the work that we used to do when we were designing services is that the systems were so old and clunky that you had to just take data dumps overnight into a data warehouse and integrate with that. And so what voice technology does, again, the same as mobile did, the same as social media did, the same as the internet did, is make businesses question how they operate and how they function. And so voice technologies are another tool in the digital transformation arsenal, which enterprises can use to be more efficient, to operate more cost effectively, and to scale what they do. And so I think we're going to see a lot more enterprise use cases as well.
Awesome. So in a lot of cases, businesses are trying to get into voice. They have this idea, they want to bring things onto this platform, and they know that it's something that they need. But what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen businesses or creators make, especially since we have a lot of newer creators in our community?
Just because you've got a good idea, or because you think you've got a good idea, doesn't mean that it actually is a good idea. And that one of the most crucial things that you can do, as painful as it is to put something early as you possibly can in front of someone who is intended to use it. Because sometimes you might find that what you think is a good idea is not actually a good idea. So you tend to see quite a lot of hammers searching for a nail, which is solutions that people think are a good idea and build them, but they might not solve a specific problem. They might not have a specific use case that's being addressed. And so sometimes it's a little bit like a hammer searching for a nail. And so we tend to advise to start with the user, start with the problem. And so forget voice when you're thinking about, even though might be thinking about building a voice solution, forget it at the start and try and do your user research, speak to your end user, speak to the person who's going to ultimately use this thing, find out how they currently use and access your company, how they currently buy your products, how they currently access your services, what's wrong with those existing channels, what their expectations are, why do they choose a competitor over you, and then within that decide and see whether or not there is a solution that a voice interface will solve. And in that way, you end up starting with the nail and then building the hammer, or finding the nail and then building the hammer, rather than trying to just build something that you think is a cool idea. Do that to learn, by all means. Build a dad joke skill tomorrow if it helps you learn, if it helps you understand the platform, if it helps you get your head around how to build stuff, how to design stuff. By all means, learn. By all means, build stuff. Practice, practice, practice. But to release something into the world, to make something that for a business to produce something, it needs to be rooted in what is going to be valuable for the user. If you look at the top 10 skills in the Alexa skill store in America, none of them are branded. NPR and Jeopardy is the top two. The rest of it are things that people have found a use case for and just gone ahead and built themselves. And so that's how, as part of businesses, is trying to find out where you can align what you are trying to achieve, your business objectives, with an actual genuine user need or problem, and have voice being the solution in the middle.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And in a lot of cases, when we talk to businesses, and I know you've seen it, you've definitely seen it, where a business is like, I'm going to take my entire experience that exists here and just shove it into voice because if I push hard enough, it'll fit. Or you have this scenario where people were like, I will build it and naturally people will come, that field of dreams fallacy. And I think voice in particular, and especially with your marketing background, is not one of those spaces where we've really solved that piece yet. So I think it's increasingly more important for people to dive into that research, like form communities or talk to people like this in order to get that, because that's that R&D that you're not able to get with pre-existing platforms right now.
Yeah, 100%, definitely. I would agree. I concur.
I guess these next two questions are kind of the same in one, so I'll kind of ask them as a group, but well, I guess this one's kind of easier at the beginning, but there's a lot of mistakes and trial and error when playing with a new interface. So what's your biggest blunder that you've had so far in voice, and what's something that you wish that you knew so maybe you could have avoided that?
Biggest blunder? That's a good question.
Kane makes no mistakes.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. I am just perfect now. I can't think of a blunder. I'll have a think. What was the other question?
What's something that you wish that you knew when you were first starting out?
What did I? Oh, these are good questions. Who asked these ones? These are solid. What did I wish I knew when I first started out? I wish I knew a little bit more about how the kind of language model works, and a little bit more about how speech recognition works. Because if you look at any of the skills in the skill store and you look at most the reviews, for example, there's a lot of reviews in there for various skills that are complaining about the fact that it didn't hear me, it didn't recognize me, things like that. And that's not your problem as a skill builder. It's the platform and the ASR, the automatic speech recognition, and the language model, the NLU, that's kind of like picking up what you say and translating it into the intents. That's the kind of bit that needs work. And so I wish when I first started out, I knew a little bit more about that kind of thing. People who have always worked in speech technology, they just know this stuff inside out. Whereas for someone new, and I suppose it's just part of the journey of learning it, when you first get exposed to something and you don't know what it is, you kind of need to go through that process of learning how it works. And so I sometimes think that if I was a little bit more technical, I would have benefited a little bit more, because sometimes now it's not as bad because I've got an understanding of the limitations of the platforms, which actually sometimes works to your detriment, because you stop sometimes imagining shooting for the stars and trying to reimagine the world. You kind of sometimes you can start working within the capabilities that the platforms can do. And so yeah, I think if I was a little bit more technical, I would have gotten the hang of things a bit quicker. And that's probably one of the things I wished I'd have known when I first started out. Also, what you realize through kind of experience as well is that it's took a while to, at the very beginning, I kind of knew that voice, the real true application of voice technologies exists everywhere and anywhere and everywhere. But it was very difficult to find examples of that, real good kind of examples of that. And so rewind, we're starting to do a hell of a lot more now on the podcast. I mean, if you listen to the last sort of like 10 episodes, we hardly mention Alexa and Google Assistant. We're talking about voice technologies right across the board. And I think that if we'd have gone down that journey beforehand, we'd probably be we don't get me wrong, we've always had that mentality, but we've got sucked into the Google and Alexa sphere quite a lot. Whereas when you pull your head out of the kind of the woods, so you can see pull your head out the trees so you can see the wood kind of thing, you realize that the scope and the potential, the amount of companies that are out there, the amount of kind of things that people are trying, the amount of innovations, it's just absolutely huge.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot that we're kind of just beginning to figure out. How do we set resources up for people? How do we make it easier for people to search how to build a conversation design experience, or what is that? And so kind of like a follow-up, and I'm always curious on this, but what resources did you use to level up in that, to make yourself feel like you had learned those gaps? Or was that all mainly through trial and error?
A little bit. I used to watch the Amazon team's Twitch streams quite a lot. That'll come in really handy. I'm not actually sure if they still do them or not, but they were actually really good.
We are doing a series with them.
Ah, cool. Nice, cool. Well, there you go then. Yeah, so I thought they were really, really good, because they used to take you through like basically a step-by-step of how to build a skill. And as they went through it, they would kind of talk you through absolutely every single part of it. And so, even though it was very technical and I'm not a developer, Dustin is the technical guy who handles all of that stuff, it helped me at least understand it enough for me to be able to hold myself in a conversation, with either a client or a guest on the podcast or whatever it might be. Yeah, that was really good resource. The Amazon blog was pretty good. Google published quite a lot of stuff. And then a lot of it was actually just talking to people, I also think that teaching is the best form of learning. And so I've been a VUI design instructor for a while now with the UX Academy. And going through that process helps you uncover things that you might not have thought of before. Running workshops, we've been doing workshops now for almost 2 years, and every single workshop you learn something different. So it's a mixture of trying to learn from the guests that we have on the podcast, learning from the people who are kind of like building this stuff, like the Amazons and Googles and things like that, but then also through experience, through building skills, through trying things, through exploring tools like Voiceflow and others, and doing stuff. It's kind of a mixture of it all, really.
Awesome. So we're going to go past this. So this is kind of topical. Everyone's wondering. There's a lot of industries that have been really deeply impacted by COVID, but what are some of the trends that you've seen specifically with voice?
So, well, I mentioned I seen the tweet that Braden put out the other day around skill usage doubling, which is interesting. So obviously that's happening. More and more people are using more and more skills. Interestingly, podcast listenership hasn't actually grown in the same way. So there was another poll on Twitter, which kind of we fed into around podcast downloads and listenership and stuff like that. And we're actually down a little bit compared to what we would typically be on the podcast. And I think that's probably because people are at home and they're not in the environments where the podcasts would be listened to. So myself, I haven't actually listened to one of the voice podcasts, whichever ones there is, probably for about 3 or 4 weeks, and it's because I'm not in the environment. Usually it's when I'm walking or if I'm on the train or doing things. Whereas because I'm in the house all the time, the space to listen to them just hasn't arose. And so I think podcast listenership has kind of gone down a bit. Skill usage has kind of gone up a bit. But what's happening is, what we're noticing is places that have stores, physical locations that are no longer open, the ones that can sustain themselves, the big companies, they are now looking at ways to increase or improve in-store engagement for after COVID. And so a lot of the conversations we've been having are around how to create in-store experiences using voice technologies so that when people go back into stores, they don't have to touch quite as much stuff and they can self-serve themselves using this kind of stuff. So that's kind of a future situation, a future trend that's being worked on now, so that when stores do reopen, you might find that you might see voice experiences in stores a little bit more. Also, right now, in terms of the stuff that's happening immediately right now, is that I mentioned IVRs and voice in the phone lines and things like that, and that's kind of where there's a lot of attention at the moment. So, one of our kind of partner organizations that kind of specialize in IVR software and the creation of interactive IVR systems, they're just run off the feet at the moment, building stuff for government organizations, for, the travel industry is just being kind of hit really hard. Like, what's going to happen to my holiday in June? And so voice technologies and conversational technologies in general, it's like, it doesn't need to be voice specific. It could be a chatbot on the website. It could be a Facebook Messenger bot. The really good example of the WhatsApp bot that the World Health Organization released a few weeks back. And so it's being used, and it's being used there to help organizations manage demand, increase in demand, scale in that customer support and customer service, as well as, it's been starting to be thought about now as how can we use it to plan for when stores do eventually reopen.
So someone just shot me a message as like a follow-up to this, and I'm kind of curious in your take, because Braden had an interesting discussion on Twitter not too long ago about talking about how elevators are a good use case for voice because buttons are gross. That is my very short version of that tweet. The question coming from the community right now is, do you think voice speakers will replace check-in or registration touchscreens? Do you see that as an opportunity?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. We've been doing a daily kind of vlog on LinkedIn, where actually it's slowed because usually I'm out walking the dog and I'll film it when I'm walking the dog. But because, we're inside a hell of a lot more, and I've started running with the dog instead, I haven't been filming it. But we tend to do it every day. And one of the things that I've been speaking about on there is exactly that, is that outside of the home, there are digital screens that we come into contact with more and more and more, whether it's check-in at airports or train stations, whether it's train ticket machines at train stations, whether it's like click and collect machines at the supermarket, whether it's ATMs. You still need to kind of put in your password, but the rest of the interaction can be done with a voice interface. Menus in restaurants, loads of restaurants have digital screens, McDonald's and things like that. And so there is absolutely nothing stopping, technology-wise, there's nothing stopping that from happening. And if you look at the technology that your likes of Voices create, and Alan AI and things like that, that use your data to create the language model, there is huge opportunities for organizations to do that. The bigger barrier, or the bigger question, is whether what the user behavior will be like towards it. So, for example, we're kind of in the process now of talking to a potential client about an in-store thing where the subject matter it could be quite sensitive, subject. And so how do you manage that? How do you manage it in public voice or conversation with an automated agent in public about sensitive topics, and even not sensitive topics? If you think about, I would just imagine either my mum or my dad or something like that trying to use a voice interface at a train ticket system, trying to get a train ticket at a train station. If the system doesn't recognize them, they're going to feel stupid. because users blame themselves. I've spent years usability testing websites and mobile apps and things like that. And the very first thing that users do is they blame themselves. Oh, it's probably just me. I didn't search properly. It's probably just me. I didn't go to the right place on the website. And one of the fundamentals that you learn when you do any user research is that it's never the user's fault. It's always the system's fault. And so, but people can't help blame themselves. And so the question is, whether or not using voice interfaces in public, I think there's definitely the technology, I think, is there. I think the use cases are there. It's whether or not users will feel comfortable doing it. And if there's a trade-off between touching this greasy menu in McDonald's that 50 other people have touched in the last 35 minutes, or just talking that you want a Big Mac and chips, then I know which one I'd rather do.
That's fair. So I guess like the kind of builds into this where we're talking a lot about how like the market is adjusting, how this is kind of like a shock system that we're all in right now. Do you think that any of the trends that you're seeing right now or any of these ideas will sustain once we're back out in the world like we normally are?
I think so. I think that a lot of them will. I'm one of those people who, like I kind of like open doorknobs with like my sleeve rolled up. Like roll my sleeve down and like try not to touch it in a public bathroom, and so I try not to touch the doorknob and stuff. And there's loads of people like that that just don't really want to touch things like ATM machines and all that kind of thing. And I think that necessity is always the mother of invention. I've worked in the digital transformation space for a long while, and you spend a long time evangelizing, a long time selling projects into senior stakeholders, a long time convincing people why they should do this in the first place, what the ROI is if you do this, gently holding their hand along the journey. And nothing spurs decisions like a burning fire underneath someone. If you have to get it done because there's something that's happening that you have no choice about avoiding or trying to avoid, then that spurs innovation. Whether it's the organization I was at before, it was like spent a long time trying to evangelize, trying to convince the senior management team to fund certain projects. And because they were a bit unsure about the direction of the company, they didn't end up doing that. But then all of a sudden they had to move out of the office into a new office, a smaller office. And so it was like, right, actually, so we can't take these massive computers, we can't take these phones, we need to actually do something. And so they had to then start changing, they had to change the culture, they had to do create better ways of operating. And so what's happening now is exactly that, is that because people are thinking they might not want to touch stuff, or they might not want to spend as long in a shop, it's much easier to use Alexa just to pre-order your coffee on your way to work than it is to stand in line and spend 10 minutes there. If you can just nip in, grab it and nip out, then even that's kind of better. And so I think that because now there is a necessity for companies to think about what it's going to be like when we return back to normal, that I think will spur the innovation that's needed to build these products, to use this technology, to find those use cases. And once they're there. It's once you've voicified a menu in McDonald's, it's not going to go away. It's just a case of encouraging people to use it. And if people are either not wanting to touch stuff, or they're already getting themselves familiar with using voice to interact with technology, smart speakers are historically training wheels for voice assistants on mobile phones. So most people that have smart speakers have an increase in voice assistant usage on their mobile phones since having got a smart speaker. And so people are getting educated. And I think people are, whether they are quite ready totally on a mass scale, I don't know, but I think there's enough people who are willing and able who would to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that's the most exciting for me about this, and you kind of hit on this a little bit around how people are spending more time at home. So they're really actually finding ways to interact with these devices, is I think that with this right now, I'm hoping that there'll be this sustained idea of what or how important contextual design is, where we're so blessed with this idea of you design and people can access it from literally anywhere. What happens when you're designing for a specific situation or specific place that someone's in? Because that's really where voice can stand out. And I'm hoping that that will also spur a lot of inspiration in terms of creators building out more things that are going to be more contextually fitting with the voice devices that are available.
Yeah, 100%. The only thing kind of holding it back a little bit at the moment is just user behavior and usership. If one of the VoiceBot podcasts was with Tom Hewitson of LabWorks, and he actually gave the presentation at All About Voice last October, which we were at, and we had a good conversation about it. Is that what his kind of philosophy was? Is that yes, multimodal. So to use your example of contextual based interfaces, whether it's in a watch, Speedly have been creating voice interfaces in watches that use Siri shortcuts to integrate into apps on the Apple Watch. Is really fantastic. You've got screen smart displays, Google with the interactive canvas, Amazon with the Alexa presentation language, you've got Android Auto, etc., etc., etc. There's all this potential, but the question is, how much effort does it take versus the return that you get right now? And that's kind of Thomas Hewittson's point, is that for 10% of users using screens, it's not what he doesn't think is worth the effort. We had a chat with Daniel Padgett from Google. He's the head of conversation design at Google, and that's going to come out on the podcast probably. There's going to be a lead time on it because we've got a few ahead of it, but it's probably going to be 2 weeks time. And that's exactly what we discussed, is where is multimodality going? Where is this kind of like highly contextual based interface heading? And some of the kind of examples that he was talking about are fantastic. Like, there's no reason why an Android phone can't recognize when it's screen down versus docked. And if it's screen down, it uses more audio to communicate something rather than showing you it on the screen. So if it's docked, it might, if you ask it for the weather, it might just, show you that it's raining and say it's going to rain. Whereas if it's face down, you can't see the screen, it might give you more information. It might tell you what time it's going to start raining. It might play some thunder sounds and things like that. If you're in the car, it might use bigger graphics, bigger text, because you're only going to be glancing at it. You're not going to be reading it. And so the potential is there. The potential is certainly there to make these interfaces mold and shape to wherever we are and whatever context we're in. And that's what I really like about Bixby, is that a lot of that stuff is kind of either built in or really easy to do with Bixby. So that's definitely the way it's heading. The question is, how long will it take, and when will the user behavior kind of catch up? When will we be using these devices often enough and constantly enough to make all of that extra effort worthwhile?
Awesome. So we have about 8 more minutes. We got a ton of questions in the chat. So I'm going to skip to the last question that we have over here, which is a little bit more of a fun one. Would you like to see an accent like yours on Amazon? And do you think that will happen at any point?
Well, good question. First of all, I'm not a Geordie. I am probably what you would say. I would say like I'm half Geordie, half Yorkshire. So I'm from a place called Stockton, which is in between Newcastle and Leeds. So we're kind of like the forgotten land in the middle, where we're not quite kind of northern enough to be Geordie, but we're not quite southern enough to be like broad Yorkshire. And so, yeah, but I would like to see northern accents on Alexa. I don't know why. It could potentially happen. There's a lot more activity around synthetic voices and synthetic voice creation now. And Amazon have got themselves, they've got a service that will create basically a clone of someone's voice that you can then use through Polly and through Alexa. At the moment, it's really expensive because it takes a lot of training data. But if you look at your likes of Lyrebird, which was acquired by Descript, that only takes 1 minute of audio to create a clone of your voice. And so whether it's Amazon and Alexa that will have that Geordie accent, I don't know, but I definitely think that we're going to see more and more synthetic voices used in more and more places. And it wouldn't surprise me to see actually people having synthetic clones of their voice that they can use in things like Google Duplex or whatever your assistant is to start doing stuff for you on your behalf, kind of almost as if it is you, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Eventually, you won't even need to answer your own phone calls, maybe.
That's it. I could do with that. If it was one that could respond to my emails, then that would be absolutely ideal, because that's where all this time is spent.
Awesome. So I'm going to quickly go through some of the questions that we have in here. I've got a ton of private DMs, some in the general. So don't worry, guys, we don't get to your question. There'll be more time where I'm sure you guys can tweet at Kane, and hopefully he will get back to you. But there's a ton in here. I think one of them that comes up a lot, especially now as people are trying to build businesses or sustain themselves maybe off of voice apps, is do you have any suggestions on how people can better leverage ISP or monetizing their skills?
Yeah. This is the question, isn't it? Is at the moment, it's almost, I think with ISP, we're in a stage where we were at with skills in general, which is that the use cases weren't found straight away, and that the execution of it wasn't always great. And so with ISP, we're seeing a lot of experimentation. However, a lot of people are charging for stuff that shouldn't really be chargeable, I don't think. So if I have, I was speaking to someone a while back who's building a podcast app, and their ISP was going to be charging, £1 a month subscription to be able to play the podcast at double speed. And it's like every single podcast app in the world plays it at double speed. Why would I pay to
Yeah.
get functionality that I already have elsewhere? And so that's the hardest part of ISPs, is that at the moment people are implementing them to implement them to see whether or not people will bite. And I think some of the people that are not having a great success is either because they don't have enough users or enough returning users, or they don't have a value proposition that's good enough. And so the biggest tip, I can't tell you what the actual solution is because it will be dependent on your company, your skill, your experience, but it's trying to frame what that value proposition is and trying to find something that's actually worth paying for. So in the podcast app example, if we had a bit more time with VUX World, I could see ourselves charging £5 a month to get one exclusive interview with one of the industry thought leaders that you can only get on that device, on that platform. And that's kind of worth it, because you're kind of covering someone's time to spend sharing their thoughts, so we can get deeper involved into things. And so it's kind of that's the kind of biggest tip, is to spend some time really thinking about what is the value proposition that you're actually offering, and is it worth it. And then you can also test it as well. So rather than you can either deploy it, or you can do some testing. So there's, even using Voiceflow, you could do this kind of testing where you just build a flow, build a prototype, have the upsell, run it through something like Pulse Labs, and see how many people bite, see what people think of that proposition, so you can gather your learnings before you actually go ahead and execute.
Awesome. I think we have time for one quick question, and then we'll go into parting wisdom. But when you're presenting your work to businesses or clients, what do you normally bring with you? Since Voice is kind of an experiential platform, is there something that you do to better communicate what you're working on?
So it depends what kind of phase and what stage we're at, essentially. I'm a massive believer that you should experience something in the most realistic way that you possibly can. But when people create websites, they'll create mock-ups, and they'll say, this is how it's kind of going to look. But it's not until you actually see the website built in HTML with the CSS in it that you actually understand what it feels like to navigate the website. I could explain to you how this song's going to sound, and I can show you the instruments that I'm going to play the song with, but it's pointless until you've actually got the song in front of you, because I can tell you it's going to sound fantastic. I can tell you that the trumpet's going to sound like this, but it's not until you hear the song itself that you really understand it. And so whenever we present anything, we try to veer away from showing scripts and veer away from showing very designed diagrams and maps and things like that. And we focus on the actual experience and showing the experience running on the device, and having the client actually be the one that uses it. Because if I'm using it, I know how it works. I know what to say to get through to the next stage and to do whatever, whereas a client might not. And so we tend to, as much as we possibly can, have all of the presentations be around showing them and interacting with the actual thing in the audio. Because people will read something, they'll read a script and they'll say, we don't want it to say that, it needs to say something different. But how things sound and how things read are two totally different things, and within the context of the experience as well. You'll sometimes get like people who will pick out one line from the middle of an experience that's taken totally out of context, but when you hear it in the flow, when you come from elsewhere up here and then you go through this piece of dialogue, you need to hear it in context and not in isolation. And so showing the actual thing, playing the audio, having someone interact with it right there and then is, I think, the best way to display and demonstrate what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kane, for taking the time to chat with us. I just really want to give a quick shout out to all the work that you've been doing. For those of you who are attending and you haven't listened to his podcast yet, definitely do so. You can check that out at VUX.world. And all of Kane's social information will be shared after this as well. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Is there any kind of like one-liner parting wisdom that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Well, one thing that has just come to mind is that if you are working in with an organization and you're trying to bring about a conversational strategy, we're actually creating a voice readiness assessment, which will be live probably next week, mid next week.
Mhm.
Essentially, it'll take you 5 minutes. You just go through, you put down your situation, what your aims are, what you've done so far, what skill sets you have, all that kind of stuff. And then me and Dustin review each one ourselves, and we'll put together a report for you which says this is how you're doing, this is the way you can improve. And so if anyone is looking for some actual, to take us up on some of that actual advice, it's free, totally free, take you 15 minutes. So that'll be out kind of next week. And other than that, in terms of parting wisdom for anyone who is even remotely interested in this stuff, I would just say read as much as you can, consume as much as you can, build as much as you can, and learn as much as you can. Because if you can do one thing every day, which is the philosophy that we built VUX World on, if you can do one thing every day that just takes you a tiny step forward, in 2 years' time, we would have never thought that that we'd have a consultancy and a media company and this kind of stuff going on. But it's all because we just do, one thing every day, get one thing done every day, and yeah, in 2 years' time, it'll be a different story.
Awesome. And for anyone who's interested in more upcoming events, we have an AMA with Braden, our CEO, next week, along with another Fix It Hour with Nico. We also have an AMA with Kathy Pearl, who's the head of conversation design and community at Google. We have all of these things available at voiceflow.com/events and also within our community if you guys are not already part of that. So thanks again, Kane, for joining, and thank you everybody for participating in this conversation. We hope to see you guys at more events coming up soon. Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Pleasure.